Okay, you guys ready to start again?
Okay.
So I am Dr. Harvey 2. I am Dr. Harvey 2, or Little Dr. Harvey, whatever you want to call me. I have a doctorate in marital and family therapy, and I started out working with gender stress identity issues, or gender identity stress issues, and worked with men and boys. And then I got into domestic violence, where I worked with perpetrators of domestic violence. And not the victims, but the ones beating each other up. Men and women, but mostly men. And they're usually the ones that do it worse, so they get caught more often. But the one thing I noticed working with them is that the few people in our program that recidivated or committed violence again also tended to be the worst eaters. So there's one guy who had come to class, and this was his breakfast, a liter of Dr. Pepper and a king-size Hershey bar. That's what he had for breakfast every single day. And he ended up beating up his significant other again. And so I thought, this is really interesting. There has to be a connection between nutrition and psychology, and I started studying it. Also, I have an autoimmune disease, so I was very interested in it for my own sake. And so I have done a lot of studying of nutrition from a psychological aspect, rather than like my mom, she's on the physiology side of it. So when she comes in, I'm sure she'll be giving you guys more of the science stuff. But we'll talk about at least some of it. One person I know, a psychologist I know, she works as an addiction counselor. And she found when she added nutrition to the alcohol program that they had about a 50% success rate, which is double the average. Usually it's only about 25%. If it's a good program, it's 25% successful in getting an addict to stop drinking alcohol. And she doubled that simply by getting them to eat their vegetables and add some protein and stuff to their diet. Which makes sense if you understand the literature, because if you don't have the amino acids and you don't have cholesterol and things like that, you can't produce the neurotransmitters that make your brain feel good. And of course you're going to reach out to something to alleviate the horrible feeling that you have inside of yourself, and drugs works really good for that. So insulin resistance is something that I see a lot of issues stemming from, and it's so common in our culture now. If you are not insulin resistant, and I believe a third of our country is officially insulin resistant, then you are probably on your way towards being insulin resistant. So it is, the insulin resistance and of course the resulting obesity from that is probably the world's biggest problem. And certainly in developed countries, it's the biggest problem that we're facing. You know, we talk about racism and politics and things, war and stuff like that, but it's actually being fat that is what's destroying the world right now. So it's very interesting. We're not worrying about Genghis Khan invading, we're just worried about not eating too much McDonald's. Although, if you have seen, have you guys watched the Fathead documentary yet?
Yes.
You have? Okay. So then you know you can eat at McDonald's safely, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Are
I
you
was remembering.
Yeah, right, because he ate at McDonald's. Okay, so what does insulin do in your body? What is the role of insulin? Do you guys know? Have you guys talked about this? It controls your blood sugar. Okay, so where does insulin come from? Where is it produced in the body?
Pancreas.
Pancreas, okay? So I'm not an artist, but you know, you have your pancreas. And this is an easy question, but what stimulates it to release the insulin? What was that? High glucose levels, okay? So the sugar goes up in your body. There's when she comes back, she can talk about the parts of the brain that control this, but the whole HPA axis and everything, I think it's the pituitary releases a chemical that tells the pancreas to release insulin so that it can clean out the bloodstream, right? So normally you have so much blood in your bloodstream. When it's above the safe levels, your pancreas releases insulin. If it's below the safe levels, then your body will start to release chemicals that make you hungry and maybe even craving sugar so that you can get those levels back up, because of course you will die without any sugar in your bloodstream. Now, do you have to eat sugar to have sugar in your bloodstream? What else can cause it to? Well, carbs are sugar, right? Carbs break down to glucose. Any carb, doesn't matter if it's your hamburger bun or a candy bar. Protein, okay? So protein can cause Does anybody know the process, what it's called? Yep. Gluconeogenesis. Genesis is to create, like the book in the Bible, creation of the So protein can create glucose in the body if you need it. Fasting is a protective, muscular protein protective state. So unless you're doing really long-term fasting, what your body says is if there's no food at all, then we better hold on to stuff as much as we can. And so it will try to avoid burning your protein, or it'll lower the metabolic rate of burning protein so that you don't lose it. Keto also is muscle protecting. So normally when you go on a diet, you lose fat, but you also lose a lot of muscle. Intermittent fasting and keto are protein protective. They're protein sparing. So you're less likely to lose muscles, which is why a lot of athletes are using keto and intermittent fasting. You saw, what was the guy's name in your presentation?
Terry Crews.
Right, Terry Crews. He's definitely not losing his protein. He does keto and intermittent fasting. All right, so glucose goes up, insulin goes up, and then insulin gets sent into the body to grab the sugar, the glucose, and take it into the cells. So you have, your muscle cells, and you have your receptor sites. You guys have all learned about receptors, right? Okay, so what insulin does is it actually activates the receptor sites so that it will let glucose in. That's what its job is to do. So insulin stores. It tells glucose to get in here. It opens up the gates. Now, the way we eat in America, the standard American diet status, we have tons of sugar in our bloodstream, unless you're on keto or something like that. You've got tons of glucose. Insulin is working overtime in order to get it in, and these receptors are sensitive. They're little divas in the body, and they can't handle constantly being stimulated. They don't want to work hard, and if you make them work hard, they can either break or they can downregulate, which means they go to the inside of the cell so that you can't stimulate them. Same thing happens with drugs. Okay, you take cocaine, right? You've got your neuron, and your other neuron on that side, and you've got the receptor sites. You take cocaine, you've got tons of that drug activating these receptors and sending action potentials down. Tons of activation, and eventually those receptors go, screw this, you're not activating me anymore. And now all of a sudden what happens the next time you take cocaine?
You need more.
You need more. Okay? And cocaine is especially good at this. They say that you never get as good as the first time on cocaine. Plus the drug dealers are usually really good and they give you the best stuff the first time you buy it from them. Make sure you get addicted to it. But this is why addiction happens. And now, even when you're not taking the cocaine, now you have less receptor sites. So how do you feel generally? You feel bad, okay? Depends on what the receptor site's for. If it's for epinephrine, you're not going to feel as energetic. If it's for serotonin, now you're going to feel depressed. If it's an opioid receptor, now you're going to feel in pain. Because an opioid receptor's job is to numb you. And you don't want to be constantly having chronic pain, fibromyalgia, right? That sucks. So this is also happening with insulin receptors. Eventually, they don't want to be activated, and they become resistant to opening up and letting glucose into the cells. And that's basically what insulin resistance is in a nutshell. I'm going to show you a video real quick. Tell me if she's shown you this already. Where's my browser? Have you seen this one? No? Okay.
Hi, I'm Tabitha Hume, and today we're going to be learning about carbohydrate metabolism and insulin resistance. Now, to learn about that properly, we need to understand what goes on inside the body. So let's start. Here is the blood, and it's got a little bit of energy or glucose in it. We need that. And here is the tummy, unfortunately, empty. Now, at any given time, if I was to prick your finger and squeeze out a little bit of blood, we would notice, if you were normal, that there would be 5 little bits of glucose per squidge of blood. That's normal. A level of 5 is what you need to remember. Now, if we're naughty and we haven't put anything inside our tummy, but we're still running around doing a whole lot of things, we are using up that extra glucose, and our blood sugar level is now dropping. And after a little while, we've used up too much glucose, and our blood sugar level is now 3. So that sort of marks the end and says, oh, I'm now very hungry. So we put in a piece of whole wheat bread. Yay! Now we put in that piece of bread because it is a carbohydrate and it contains glucose. Now bread happens to be the kind of carbohydrate that releases its component glucoses into your bloodstream very, very fast. So after eating that piece of bread, it releases its glucose so fast that we end up with a blood that is completely chock-a-block full of glucose, blood sugar level of about 10. Now the blood really and truly is the superhighway, taking the sugar to where it needs to go. And where it needs to go is into the muscle, because that's where energy is used. But the problem lies here. We have a whole lot of little doors that lie between the blood and the muscles, and we need to open those, and there's only one thing really that opens those doors, and that is insulin. Now try and think of insulin as a little policeman. He is a great chap, but he likes to tidy things away, he likes to store things, he likes to make things all clean and tidy and perfect. So we like insulin, and he does a great job. So when our blood glucose level is very high here, little insulins run out and say, oh, this is a terrible, terrible traffic jam of glucose, I've got to clear it away. So let me start pushing on those doors, because only insulin can. And they push open those doors to the muscle and successfully open them, and then take all the excess glucose from the blood and shove it into the muscle. Then the doors close, insulin pushes off, it's done its job, and we are left now with a normal blood sugar level of 5 and muscles that are full of glucose. And you might say to me, well, extra sugar like that into the muscle might just turn to fat. Well, scientifically, yes, but in reality, let me show you what does happen. Inside those muscles, we've got glycogen stores, which is stored kind of glucose that is ready there for emergencies. So the extra glucose that goes in has nowhere to store. So you might say, well, what happens then? Well, let's look inside that muscle. We've got a whole lot of little muscle fibers that jump up and down all the time, using energy and releasing it as heat. Just touch your arm, you know that you're warm, you're alive. That muscle has tone. It is jumping up and down all the time, using energy and releasing it as heat. And that's all good and well. So when we put in extra glucose, those little muscle fibers just jump up and down even more, and they start releasing even more heat. So that's the fate of excess glucose. It makes our muscle fibers jump up and down even faster. So it gives us a bit of carbo sizing. So this is carbohydrate metabolism. We understand that. But what happens in insulin resistance? Well, let's go right back to the beginning. Here's our blood with a little bit of glucose in it that amounts to 5, which is normal. We run around, we don't eat anything, and our blood glucose level drops. We're running out of fuel. At that point in time, we eat our bread, which most people love, and that bread is a carbohydrate and releases glucose so we can fill back up again. Now that bread happens to be a quick release carbohydrate, so the glucoses that are in there are released awfully fast, and as a result our blood sugar levels fill up very quickly to a blood sugar level of 10, and we now have syrup blood. So the only thing that can store that away into the muscle where it really needs to go is insulin. Remember the little storage policeman? And these two little insulins run out into the bloodstream and say, oh, it's a terrible traffic jam. And they start pushing on those insulin receptors or those insulin doors. Now in insulin resistance, those doors are shut tight. They are really, really, really stiff. And as a result, those two little insulins can push all they like. They can shout, store, they can push, they can sweat, but those doors don't open. The body is resistant to insulin. So the body notices, hang on a second, that blood sugar level is still a little bit high after a second or two. So it sends out more insulin policemen to get that job done. And more insulins come, and more insulins come. And after a little while, we now have many, many little insulin policemen all pushing at those doors, really trying hard, all shouting, store, and trying to tidy everything up. Now with that amount of brute force, those doors are overwhelmed and the glucose is cleared from the blood. Our blood sugar level does return back to 5. So this is not diabetes. Diabetes is when your sugar level remains high and those insulins, as much as they try, don't work. This is not diabetes, this is insulin resistance. So the blood sugar level does return back to 5. But the problem lies in there being so many insulins. In the olden days, we didn't used to have a problem with there being too much insulin in the blood. As long as the sugar was cleared, we didn't care because the person didn't have diabetes. Now we know that too much insulin in the blood is a huge problem, and I'll show you why. If you happen to eat that piece of bread and it had a little bit of butter on it, a little bit of margarine or even some low-fat cheese, those fat droplets would enter into the bloodstream at the same time as that glucose from the bread. Tons and tons of insulin guys in there, all screaming store, 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 leads to one result, and that is all those little fat droplets get stored as fat very fast. And the interesting thing is somebody with insulin resistance and a resultant high number of insulins coming out to do the job stands much more chance of storing fat very fast than somebody who does not have insulin resistance. And you can see why. The body is perpetually in a state of store. Store, store, store. So any little bit of fat that comes in will be stored fast. And it's quite interesting to note that our body shape determines this, because insulin loves to store any bits of fat it can get hold of onto our tummy. So by looking at someone, their body shape will give us a good idea of how much insulin resistance or not they have. A pear shape with a small waist and bigger hips, they may not like it, but it means that their insulin is working fine. They don't have insulin problems. Somebody, however, who has an apple shape where their waist is actually a bit bigger than their hips, we know for a fact has too much insulin inside their blood. It just requires a blood test in order to tell how much. So just by looking at someone, it's quite interesting. A woman that has a waist circumference of more than 88 centimeters stands a very high risk of developing lifestyle disorders because she has insulin resistance. And by the same token, a man who has a waist circumference of more than 102 centimeters, no matter how tall or short he is, stands the chance of having lifestyle disorders because we know that he has insulin resistance. So you can see the insulin little policemen do their job beautifully. They tidy things away, they keep our blood sugar level nice and normal. But having too much of the little chaps can cause a number of problems. And those problems are all grouped together and called Syndrome X. That's what I treat. Syndrome X comprises of high blood insulin levels, a high cholesterol and strokes and heart attacks, a high blood pressure. It also leads to certain types of infertility, gout and inflammatory disorders, and a myriad of other problems that are very easily sorted out once we understand how insulin works and what to do with it. So we move on from here to what kind of diet should we be following and how do we fix this problem. Thanks for watching.
Okay, interesting, right? Okay. So this is why you do the keto diet or intermittent fasting, that it works really well for losing weight, because what you're doing is you're lowering that glucose and then you're lowering the insulin production, and now your body is not saying store fat. So even though you're eating fat, even though you're eating bacon every single day, it doesn't get stored in your body because there's nothing there to store it. Okay? There's not a lot of there at least, not a lot of insulin to store the fat, no matter how much you're eating. I once read about a guy who went on a 5,000 calorie diet, and it was mostly bacon and high fatty foods, and he still lost weight. Okay? So our government tells us, what does our government say for nutrition? Carbs. Carbs, okay? 300 grams of carbs a day is what our government tells us, which is a lot of insulin. I don't know how many of you do keto or count carbs, but I know if I'm eating 300 a day, I'm certainly not losing any weight. So keto is 100 or less. That's what the suggestion is. Interestingly, the nutrition recommendation from the government is exactly the nutrition recommendation in agriculture, because I have a farm, so I know. See exactly what I would feed my animals to fatten them up. Okay? Your animals don't get fat on hay, they get fat on grains. So I feed my animals carbohydrates to get them ready for butchering time so that they're nice and fat. Okay? That steak's got some good marbling in it. So if you want good marbling, then follow the USDA nutrition recommendations. Okay? It's also the exact diet that scientists would feed a mouse in order to create a diabetic mouse or studying diabetes. Okay? Kind of scary. All right, let's see what she has on her PowerPoint. So, okay, basically what insulin, what is this thing? Maybe I should just keep talking and not worry about her PowerPoint. Okay. So, yeah, all the stuff we were just talking about. Yeah, it's not getting into the cells. It's great. You guys have this, right? So you can look at it on your own time, too. So, point is, with insulin resistance, it is pre-diabetes. Actually, it's pre-pre-diabetes. So insulin resistance comes before you are pre-diabetic. Pre-diabetic is saying your insulin resistance is so bad, you're on the edge of becoming diabetic. Okay? So that's why so many people in the country are counted as insulin resistant. By the way, America is not the most obese nation in the world. Does anybody know who is? England. Okay, England has surpassed us, and Australia is very close behind. So as much as the world likes to criticize our country, they're not doing much better. Okay? Just keep that in mind next time you hear somebody complaining. All right, now, how are you feeling when you are insulin resistant? How does it feel? I'm a psychologist, so I'm all about how do you feel? How does it make you feel? What was that?
Lethargic?
Lethargic. Why does it make you lethargic?
Because your glucose isn't getting into the muscles, you're not getting the kind of nutrients.
Exactly. Your glucose is not getting into the muscles, so you feel muscle weakness. It's also not getting into your brain cells very well. So now you feel brain fog and you can't think straight. By the way, what are we calling Alzheimer's now? Does anybody know? Diabetes type 3. Okay? So the glucose is not getting into your brain cells, and some of your brain cells require glucose to function. They can't function on fat or ketones. So those brain cells start to die because they're starving to death, because the insulin can't get into it, or the sugar can't get into it. Okay? No matter how the insulin, if you have insulin. If you're diabetic, you're much more likely to get Alzheimer's because the glucose isn't able to get into cells in general. So you can see how much of a psychological impact this nutrition is having as well. It's very interconnected. So if you are not getting that sugar into your cells, then you're going to feel depressed, you're going to feel irritable, you're going to feel anxiety. There's a lot of ramifications to this. Okay? So another thing that's happening physiologically is that insulin helps to not only balance glucose in your bloodstream, but it also balances the absorption of glucose. So if your insulin levels are healthy, you don't have insulin resistance, then not only will you use the glucose in your blood well, but you will pass out of your body the excess glucose that you don't even need. So your insulin doesn't even need to deal with it. So people who have healthy insulin systems those are the people that can eat whatever they want and they don't gain a pound, right? They're the ones that most of us hate. That's because they're not insulin resistant and they're not even getting all of that sugar into their bloodstream. Whereas if you are insulin resistant, then there's a receptor in your intestines whose job is to open up the intestines and allow sugar to come in. If you're insulin resistant, then the insulin doesn't tell those receptors to shut off. And then, so not only are you not using that sugar appropriately in your bloodstream, but now you are absorbing way more of it than a healthy person would, and so now you have this catch-22 that is increasingly making your insulin resistance worse until you become diabetic. Okay, so you get into this spiral of sugar. Yeah, okay, I already talked about that. So when you're insulin resistant, the receptors stay on the surface of the intestinal lining and allow the blood to absorb the glucose. Now, one theory is also that because those receptors are staying open, they may also be letting other things into your bloodstream, like toxins, fecal matter, stuff like that. And so this may be a contribution to leaky gut syndrome, which a lot of us have as well because of eating crappy. So we also get an effect with the liver. So if you are insulin resistant, you are likely to start getting fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Okay. My sister was pretty overweight, and she was diagnosed with that. And they told her you probably have 10 years to live, and she was only, 33 when it happened, which is crazy. And she does not drink. And she went on keto, and within 3 months, it was gone, which is pretty amazing. So the theory is that the liver sort of becomes a storage facility for fat. Like if you can't use it anywhere, then the liver will just hold on to it and try to store it for future use. And then eventually the liver can't even hold on to it, so now the fatty acids in your bloodstream rise, which has its own nasty side effects that you don't want. And then eventually you get fatty liver disease, which now you need your liver. It's really important. So if it can't do its job, now you're going to have all sorts of side effects from that, and eventually it will kill you. So that's also how we get foie gras. Anybody ever had that? Fatty liver. It's a delicacy with geese. Geese and ducks is the most popular one. But they're force-fed. What do you think they're force-fed? Grain. Okay. You force-feed them grain. I think it's illegal in California now because it's actually it's kind of cruel. You literally put a metal tube down their throat and force grain into their belly, and sometimes if the person has not been trained well enough, it could explode their belly. So, yeah. So if you ever come across foie gras, then they can be humanely raised, but it's very rare and much more expensive to do it in a humane way. So just an interesting side note there. Okay, so eventually, of course, we're going to get to diabetes, because the other thing that's happening is the pancreas is starting to wear out, because you're requiring it to produce so much insulin. And at some point, you basically, like you have adrenal fatigue, you get pancreatic fatigue. And it can't continue to produce the amount of insulin that you need, and now you have diabetes. You burn out those beta cells and everything in the pancreas, and now you're potentially screwed for life. Now, that's not necessarily true when you have nutritional diabetes. If it doesn't go too long, and whatever length of time that is independent, it's individual, but you can reverse that type of diabetes with proper nutrition. I had a student once where I was teaching keto, and her boyfriend was diabetic. He was on a lot of insulin, injected insulin, and within, I think it was 2 weeks, that's all it took, he was off insulin, which is amazing. And he thought it was basically, I think he'd had it since he was a teenager, had it for at least 15 years at that point, and 2 weeks of keto, that's all it took to get off of it. So, it's pretty amazing. Okay, so now you're fat, right? Which you think, okay, that sucks, so from an appearance standpoint, I wish I was a supermodel or whatever. But that's not all there is to fat, of course. Fat, it becomes this double-edged sword that is producing its own chemicals that then make our life even more miserable. And also, we'll talk more about this, but fat starts to lead to insulin resistance, and so you have another spiral of leading to diabetes. So the more fat cells on your body, the worse it's going to be. And I'm actually going to go back, give me a second. Oops, talk about the different types of fats. Do you guys know what the 2 types of fat are? Okay, good, you won that round, okay. I meant brown and white fat. But yes, you're right, there are different types of fat, okay. So these are, this picture that you see here, you can see that there is, this is the brown fat and this is the white fat. You can see why it's called that. So brown fat is, there's more mitochondria in it, which is why it shows up brown on, if you look at it. So they have a higher metabolic rate. This is healthy fat, so the more brown fat you have, the healthier you are going to be. So in some instances, it's actually good to be fat. If it is the brown fat. Brown fat produces energy. The mitochondria in there produces ATP, which makes you feel good. So the more brown fat, the better. Okay. Let's see, what else? So white cells, fat cells, their job is just to store fat, although they do produce chemicals too, some good, some bad. Brown fat cells make heat for our body, makes energy for our body so that we feel better, so that we can handle the cold. Yeah. And it's associated with all sorts of health benefits, the more brown fat that you have. Mostly it's located on the back, the upper half of the spine, towards the shoulders, while white fat is more in the belly, more, I mean it's pretty much everywhere, but if you have belly fat, then it's definitely white fat. And slender people, not surprisingly, generally have more brown fat than overweight people do. And I say generally though because there are what we call fat skinny people. So you are thin as a rail, but you have a lot of proportionally you have a lot more white fat cells than brown fat cells. And you may also have a lot more visceral fat, which is the fat around your organs. And it's really hard to work with people to have better health with their skinny. Because I look fine, I must be fine. And that's not necessarily the case. So the way brown fat works, we can create it by cold shock, also heat shock, but it's more commonly, at least researched, that cold shock works better. So when you are cold, your body wants more heat. So it will say, let's start producing more brown fat, which is good if you live in Siberia. Okay? Probably living in the high desert, we have a much lower average amount of brown fat than somebody who does live in a cold part of the country. However, you can still do cold shock, even though it's miserable to do it on purpose. You could take a cold shower. She's like, no, no way. But that would help to trigger the development of brown fat, which also triggers the development of more mitochondria, which gives you more energy. So there are people out there who do cold therapy. Let me pull up. Have you guys heard of Wim Hof? I won't show you the whole thing, but this is, let's see, I hate showing videos I've never watched, but this is probably fine. It's dangerous.
For decades on end, Wim Hof, widely reckoned as the Iceman, has done the unthinkable. With over 23 world records, including one for taking the longest ice bath and completing a full marathon above the polar circle in temperatures close to minus 20 degrees, he proved the impossible. Granted, with what first seemed as supernatural powers, people were brimmed with wonderment, if not sheer disbelief. Along with this, it left scientists all around the globe baffled. How could this daredevil possibly withstand such cold conditions? The moment Wim Hof submerges in ice, all laws of physiology are defied. By turning his mental thermostat up, he has learned to control his heart rate, breathing, as well as his blood circulation. All three elements that are linked to what is known as the autonomic nervous system. After 35 years of research and practice, the Iceman has mastered this control system like no other.
Zonder wetenschap zijn we niet. Geen speculatie, resultaten.
In 2011, scientists from the reputed Dutch Radboud University thoroughly investigated his physiology with stunning results.
Onze belangrijkste conclusie, dat we nu voor het eerst heel duidelijk en onomstotelijk feitelijk hebben aangetoond dat een mens dus wel in staat is om zijn autonome zenuwstelsel en zijn immuunrespons op een vrijwillige manier te beïnvloeden. En dat was echt iets wat in de tekstboeken staat, dat kan niet.
Heel lang hebben mensen ook gedacht, ja die Wim dat is gewoon circus. Maar nu heb je ineens het bewijs.
With his body as his ultimate research lab, Wim Hof is literally living proof of what the human body is capable of. Yet what he has achieved, you can too.
Maar nu gaat het verder, want heel veel mensen kunnen hiermee geholpen worden. Dat is mijn overtuiging even.
As a result, he developed a Wim Hof method. Combining multiple techniques, it comes down to the following main practices: breathing and meditation techniques, cold shower therapy, and full-on focus. While advancing the immune system, mastering these tools also ensures a great mental and physical boost, leading to intensified awareness and stacks of energy. And last but certainly not least, it reduces stress levels. Through various workshops, online courses, and expeditions to the Spanish Pyrenees, Poland, and the African Kilimanjaro, thousands have participated by immersing in ice baths or simply dancing their socks off. So join in, take the plunge, and reclaim your inner fire.